down 1,000 times. I ain't going nowhere. Yeah, I'm standing right here. Demons all around, but I ain't got no fear.
What's going on, guys? We are rolling into July very soon, so we are close in the fantasy football season. Want to do a video today specifically on who should be number one for fantasy football 2023. Who is that first overall pick? Wanted to have an open discussion with you guys today. Sitting out here in the backyard here. Now, in my hand, I got a magazine. Yes, I don't buy magazines, but I actually bought one for demonstration purposes today. And I wanted to have an open discussion about the consensus consensus rankings and the first overall pick every single year. Now, you could see on this magazine, which is total BS. Okay, I'm just picking on this magazine, but they're all the same. And I'm not just picking on magazines. I'm picking on podcasts. I'm talking about the consensus rankings. I'm talking about the websites. I'm talking about anyone who's anyone on YouTube. Every single person in the fantasy football industry, 99% are copying and pasting. So I want to highlight this magazine here. They're asking, who's number one? That's what they're asking, okay? As if we don't know the answer, because you guys are going to say the same thing. You're going to say the guy that finished on top last year is going to finish on top again this year. I'm not going to spoil it for you. The answer is Christian McCaffrey, who finished second last year. Again, they strayed away. Eckler was the number one, so they went Christian McCaffrey this year. The audacity to even ask who's number one, knowing the answer. Like, you guys are just going to take last year's top finisher and tell people to draft him in that order again. Why is this wrong? Why is this a mistake? I looked at the wide receiver number one is Jefferson. He finished on top. I looked at the number one at running back. It was Christian McCaffrey. And it was, I believe, Austin Eckler at 2. Again, 1 and 2. They finished at 1 and 2 last year. So it's a direct copy and paste. So you're saying, well, Joe, everybody's copying and pasting. How do you differ? What do you do differently? It's not so much on who you draft first overall. It's about who you draft in every round, the optimal players. That's why I created the 16-round draft solution. How it differs is this. I omit all the guys that I feel are going to bust. Last year, I told you, based on history, guys, history shows us a lot. Based on history, Jonathan Taylor last year is not worth a first overall pick. He's going to decline. How did I know he's going to decline? Because history shows me that. History shows me that, guys. Every single year we see it. The guy on top, something happens. They get injured, or there's a quarterback change, or the offense is different, or they're on a Super Bowl hangover, or something changes every single year. And the mainstream, the fluffy podcasts, the four-letter networks, the every other podcast, even these new guys coming up, I'm a fantasy analyst. They're just taking last year's top finishers, telling you to draft them in that order. This is wrong in every sense of the word. So how do I tell? Well, Jonathan Taylor was coming off a pinnacle year in 2021. He had like 18 touchdowns. He had like 1,800 yards. How is he going to duplicate those numbers again? He's not. He's just not going to do it. The last time, I've said this before, a running back finished 2 years in a row on top was Priest Holmes in 2002, 2003. It's very highly unlikely that these guys finish on top 2 years in a row, and you have to accommodate for that. So you draft someone else. So last year I said, I like Henry. Well, why do you like Henry, Joe? Well, he had a bad year in 2021. In 2022, he's going to have a better year. He's going to have a bounce back. And he did. And Saquon Barkley, right? His 1 year removed from his injury, he came back, had a decent 2021, wasn't the best. In 2022, I knew he'd have a big year. He was outside the top 10 in all consensus rankings, but everybody had DeAndre Swift as a top 8 running back. And I said, listen, Swift sucks. Avoid him. He's had years to wow us. We're not wowed. Go for Saquon Barkley, right? And Barkley, of course, finished well ahead of DeAndre Swift. Swift busted. So again, this year, I'm looking at these magazines. Who's number one? Like, how do you even, we know who the Chiefs have at number one. It's Christian McCaffrey again, or Austin Eckler, because they finished at 1 and 2 last year. I'm just pulling it up here. I'm just trying to pull up their consensus rankings here. Again, they have the audacity to do this every single year, and they're wrong every single year, and that's the thing. So again, I'm just going to pull up the rankings here at running back here. So I'm almost there. I'm just trying to flip through the pages. So actually, hold on. This particular magazine has Jonathan Taylor at 2. I'm actually impressed. But either way, Austin Eckler's a top 3. Hold on, let me pull this up here. Can you guys see that? Okay, one sec here. Either way. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is Christian McCaffrey's at 1. Why? Because he finished at 1 or 2 last year, and they've got him at number 1. Okay, now they've slid in Jonathan Taylor. They're trying to be different. I'm actually impressed this magazine did a little bit something different. They have Jonathan Taylor at 2. I got Bijan at 101. If you guys want to know who my guy is at 101, it's Bijan Robinson. So I wanted to have like an open discussion with you. We're going to do more of these backyard talks because I think more people need to be aware, more needs people to be awake, because everybody else is just copying and pasting. That's all they're doing. Right, that's all they're doing. They told you Jonathan Taylor number 1 last year. They told you Cooper Kupp number 1 last year. I told you Cooper Kupp's going to bust. Now, I got a lot of criticism last year. I did a video when Cooper Kupp got hurt telling people, I told you so. I told you a decline would happen. And they all basically said, yeah, no, Joe. And they said every name in the book. And they're like, yeah, you know, you're a whatever, curse, enter curse word here. They said that because they were wrong. They knew they were wrong. And injuries don't count, they say. Well, let me tell you something. Injuries do count. If they didn't count, because remember, guys, Cooper Kupp was ranked number 1 last year. Everyone said drafted number 1. He busted. And what I mean by busted is he didn't produce the fantasy points. He didn't finish where his ADP was, right? He didn't finish as a number 1 wide receiver, give or take. He busted significantly. He was the number 1 consensus first overall. I told you to avoid him because declines happen, Super Bowl hangovers happen, injuries happen. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, fantasy points at the end of the season will not be there. And I was right. So I did this post on Twitter, and everybody started resharing it, calling me every name in the book. But they were wrong. And like I said, injuries count. If they didn't count, guess who would be number 1 right now at wide receiver? It'd be Cooper Kupp. But because he got hurt and because injuries count, he's not the number 1 wide receiver. Let's see where they got him here. And this isn't just, I'm not just picking on this magazine particularly. Every podcast, they got Cooper Kupp at 3. Okay, let me just put it out here. This particular magazine. Now he's sitting a little lower on some other rankings here, but there you go. Cooper Kupp's at 3. I don't know if you can see it. If injuries didn't count, Cooper Kupp would be number 1, but he's not. He's not number 1. That's the thing. If he was number 1, right, then I'd say, okay, injuries don't count, but you didn't do that. Everybody doesn't have Cooper Kupp at number 1 because injuries count because he got hurt. But everybody told me last year, Joe, injuries don't count. How dare you say Cooper Kupp busted? Injuries don't count. He got hurt. He was on pace to be number 1 again, but he got hurt. But injuries happened. This is the psychology behind these idiots, right? They don't know what they're talking about. They're taking last year's top finishers, telling you to draft them again in that same order, and they're not factoring in injury. You got to factor in that people, when they come off Cinderella years and they have this amazing year, there's a probability that there's going to be a decline, a Super Bowl hangover if they won the Super Bowl, or a possible injury. I factor that in. And that's why 16-round draft solution is the game changer. So if you've not secured the solution, get it below. And then you guys will see the vision. You'll see the light. You say, I had an aha moment. I actually see what the counselor's talking about. We're done with this copy and paste BS. And the problem why they dislike me, a lot of the mainstream, is because this is a model that's worked for them, right? They've been fooling and deceiving people for years. Hey, this works. We're just going to tell people. We're going to tell the herds, hey, you know what? Just draft based on last year. These guys finished on top again. Draft them again in that order. Justin Jefferson finished on top. Draft them again in that order. It's a different offense. It's a different change. They brought in Jordan Addison. Maybe things change. They brought in Hawkinson. Maybe Jefferson just maybe has a decline at the position this year. Maybe someone else steps up. Maybe we should think about that. Maybe we should consider that someone else is going to finish on top of Jefferson. Maybe, just maybe, Jamar Chase has a better ceiling. Jamar Chase finished as a top 12 receiver and he only played 12 games. Burrow's in a contract year. Maybe, just maybe, Jamar Chase could finish on top of Jefferson, but nobody has the guts to say, I want Jamar Chase ahead of Jefferson. I do. I think Jamar Chase finishes with more fantasy points, but nobody's willing to say that. Nobody's willing to take that leap. Bijan Robinson, I like him way more than I like Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler benefited last year with Joe Lombardi. Joe Lombardi gave him a ton of checkdowns, guys, okay? Not to mention Mike Williams was hurt. Keenan Allen played like 10 or 11 games. He was banged up. So what happened, guys, was that Eckler benefited from more checkdowns. He got more opportunity. It's very simple, guys. It's simple mathematics. 127 targets. There's no way he's going to have another 127 targets. That's top 17 wide receiver numbers. He was tied with Mike Evans last year in wide receiver targets, and he's a running back. So, again, guys, you got to take a look at that. Last year, everybody told you James Conner. Draft him as a top guy. Early draft capital. I'm like, stay away from James Conner. He was overinflated in the touchdown category. yet people still copied and pasted them. They're not looking for trends. They're not looking and projecting ahead. Everybody told you Rashad Penny last year. I'm like, no, Penny can't stay on the field. There's a reason why the Seahawks drafted Kenneth Walker in the second round, but yet everybody had Penny ahead of Walker. And this is the type of copy and paste BS that will not help you guys win your leagues, guys. This will not help you guys win your leagues. You will not succeed if you're copying and pasting. I cannot implore with you guys enough the reason why you got to stop listening to the mainstream. So to answer the question, who's number one? For me, guys, it's Bijan Robinson. Youth, opportunity, talent, early draft capital in him. He's going to get the volume. I know Allgeier's there, but every running back in round one has question marks. Jonathan Taylor, love him. Love him for a bounce back. Problem is, Anthony Richardson, the quarterback, is basically a running back. He's going to get a lot of, rushing touchdowns. Going to take away a lot of rushing attempts from Jonathan Taylor. But when you look at that committee, there's nobody else there. It's just Jonathan Taylor. There's a ton of guys that have question marks in round one, right? Jefferson, possible decline. Maybe he's due for an injury. He's a skinny, lanky guy. Maybe he gets an injury. He's been perfect for a couple years now. Maybe he goes down this year. Maybe he doesn't. We don't know. But he is a safe pick. I'm not saying Jefferson's going to bust. With wide receivers, you tend to get a little more stability. With running backs, they tend to go down with injury a little more. Very hard to duplicate those numbers. So, guys, who are you drafting first overall? Drop a comment below. But understand, things change. Eckler will bust, right? CMC will get hurt. I'm telling you right now. Well, Joey can't predict injuries. CMC was hurt in 2020 and 2021. Played 10 games in those seasons. Right? Had a good 2022. He's not a young running back. He will go down. Elijah Mitchell will come back, dip into that volume. Things change. So you got to accommodate for changes. So don't just tell me, my first overall number one pick is going to be the same as last year, because every year it doesn't happen. I remember I really started to notice this trend years ago, but one year that really stood out to me was Michael Thomas. I think he had a good 2018 or was it 2019 year. And he had this pinnacle year. And everybody told you Michael Thomas as the number one wide receiver. And he busted significantly. And that was the perfect example when I started showing people, like, it doesn't work the same way as it did last year. Yes, there could be some similarities, but you never draft a player based on last year specifically. Got to take a look at the new situation. There's other people emerging. There's other people falling, right? You got to accommodate for that, and that's what 16 rounds does. So if you've not secured the solution, guys, get the 16-round draft solution. Fantasy full force. It is here, guys. Have yourself a great weekend. So who's number one? Let me know. We know who everybody else, you know who the mainstream, the consensus, and the magazines and the podcasts are taking. Don't believe them. Use your mind, guys. Adjust, accommodate, think forward, because that's how you're going to win your leagues. Subscribe, thumbs up, guys. Drop a comment below. Who do you like at first overall? I like Bijan or Jonathan Taylor. Like either one of those guys for a big year. Let me know below. Love to get your feedback. And remember, it has nothing to do with just one round. You have to make sure you have optimal players in each round to crush your leagues. Subscribe, thumbs up, guys. Appreciate you. Have a good weekend. I'm out.